it's about how to write for academics. So for me, the topic is just what you choose to deal with as you're doing the exercises. So if you want also to change it from one assignment to another assignment and each time take another topic, that's fine. I really don't care. It's not what it's all about. So I do want again to emphasize that within the article structure, what I found was most difficult was this understanding of how to make an introduction that comes from the very general topic into focusing on your topic and why it's important. The other issue was about the methodology, what's in a methodology and what's in a background. And I wrote it to some of you, how to divide the discussion. I think most of you also were struggling a bit with that. And one of the things that I must say, everybody struggled, I still struggle with, is what are conclusion and why they are so different from the discussion. How do you not repeat it yourself, but nevertheless give conclusions? So I mean, that's fine. Anything else? Again, I think the good aspect is that all means that the following assignment will be that each one of you will have to prepare a presentation, again, on any topic you choose. And I think then we're actually going out for the Pesach break, for the holidays. So next week I will let you know exactly when will be the next time we're meeting, but it means that for the presentation assignment, you'll actually have several weeks to prepare it. Okay, so hopefully that will allow you enough time. And then, still thinking of how to do it, I'm kind of thinking if it will be better to have each one of you present in class, and then all the other here the comments, then we can also learn from that, or just each one of you will have a private meeting with me
document that outlines the requirements? Like, is there a model research proposal that you're supposed to follow along? I know when I wrote my thesis for meteorology, there was like a model thesis and a model research proposal. Is there something like that we should be following?
No, the short answer. There is not a formal model by the university, but, and that's a big but, what I'm going to do now is to provide you the model, what you should actually follow, and what most students do, and what I recommended my students who were writing their proposal, is ask your fellow students that already submitted a proposal for their own proposal and see what they did. So usually if I have, so for one of my students now that submitted a proposal, I told him, go and ask this person who just submitted last year their proposal, and it's very similar to what you actually need to do. So you can use this one as a model, and for the general model, that's exactly what I'm going to do now. Okay, so you'll see it here, and then again, as I said, don't be alarmed by the 5 pages as opposed to maybe 10 pages. Some department in the university ask, some asking for 15. It doesn't matter because the model is the same. It's just a question of how much do you actually elaborate in each section. Okay. So one more thing is I want to explain you how the process actually works. So within each department, we have committees. We have the MA committee for the master, and we have a PhD committee, which is made of the faculty member in the department. Sometimes the head of the department sits in both committees, but it doesn't really matter. And each committee has their head of the committee. Now, when you finish your proposal, you need to have your supervisor's signature on it. So working on the proposal needs to be done with your supervisors, so they can comment and help you. And then in the end, when they think you're ready, they sign it and they tell you, okay, now you submit it to the secretary, to the administrator of the department. I think in archaeology it's Galit, in maritime civilization it's Laura. With a CC to the head of the committee or not, it doesn't matter because the administrator will transfer it to the head of the committee. I'm not sure who is the head of the MA committee in archaeology now. In maritime civilization, it's Debbie, and then the head of the committee look at your proposal, sending it to all the other members of the committee, and also usually for an MA proposal, one external reader. And so that's someone who is an expert in the topic of your proposal outside of the university, in order for him or her to read the proposal and comment. And then you get all those comments back from the head of the committee. So it could range from, let's say, 2-3 comments to 5 or 7 comments. Okay, depends how many members of the committee. Obviously, if you have 2 supervisors on your proposal, both of them are in the committee, you already excluded 2 members of the committee, so you'll get much less comments because your supervisor cannot comment on your
comments that were conflicting with each other, and then they're difficult to resolve because you can't make both commenters happy. So that's my first question: is if they see them, and if not, what do you do when two people say the exact opposite thing? And then my second comment or question is, are there different levels of comments? And what I mean by that is, again, in government documents, you get back like a low-level comment that's called an administrative comment, and then there's like a substantive comment that you have to address, but it's not that big of a deal. And then there's something called a critical comment, where if you don't answer it, it's immediately rejected. I was wondering if there's anything like that where the commenter says, "Oh, I'm just mentioning this, you don't need to say anything, I just thought you'd like to know," and then if there's a higher level of comment where they say you absolutely must address this, or if all comments come in at the same level.
These are very good questions. The bottom line here is that the comments that you get on your proposal, as well as with your articles or grant, are never as ordered as you just mentioned with government comments. And so let's start from the second question. Actually, they are not listing it as usually, in some cases, you don't ignore the fact that they're contradicting, but you actually say, well, as reviewer one, let's say reviewer one is in favor of something, say, oh, the comments are not just negative, the comments are also sometimes positive. Oh, that's a very interesting research. The way you focus is really good. And then the second reviewer say, no, the focus is totally wrong. So you can answer to the second reviewer, say, okay, we tend to agree with reviewer one, who actually said that it's good. So there is a way to manipulate, and the whole issue about how do you respond to comments is something important and something you will learn as you do it. And research proposal is a very first experience to deal with this type of comments. And here you have your supervisors. Okay, your supervisor are assigned on that thing. They should read very carefully the proposal before you submit it. First of all, because you're their students and that's their duty to actually help you. And second, because they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their friends and colleagues. So they should read it because they don't want to get back a comment. And I saw several of them saying, the external reviewers that go, out of the university and saying, I don't understand how the supervisors actually approved this proposal. It's really written badly. And I saw a couple of them in the last year. So, that's, for me as a supervisor, it's a bit embarrassing. I didn't do a proper job. People see that my students are giving away this kind of proposal, and that was my duty and my responsibility to make sure. So that's a good thing. So you have your supervisors. Also for the comments, ask them, nudge them. Don't worry about that. That's part of what we should do as part in the university. But just to finish this tab, usually you just answer each comment, and if it's contradicting, it doesn't matter. You answer to this person and you answer to that person according to what you think is correct. Okay. Then, as I said, you get the comments, get it back, you send back your revised version with a letter. The committee said, okay, they done a good job responding to that, addressing all the issues. We approve it, and then it goes to the Advanced Studies Authority, I think, and you are going into the thesis. And basically, when you submit your thesis, it goes by the same way. It goes to the committee, they send it to external reviewers. I think for master students, maybe there are 2 external reviewers, I'm not sure, for PhD for sure. And then you get it back, and so on, until it's all approved. Okay. Any question? Still here? No. Okay. So, let's go over the different section. And as I said, this is the model for the proposal. And then, based on the length of the word limits that you had, the page limit that you have, you can expand on it. So, the first thing would be an abstract, which usually do not count within the page limit. So that's why I put it here, the title page and the abstract. You have the title page, you have abstract. It depends. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It depends where you put it. Okay, abstract you do in the end. You finish writing the proposal, you write an abstract. You had a whole assignment about how to write an abstract. You all did it quite well, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the abstract. Okay.
Can I ask one more question though?
Yes.
The abstract that we wrote made a presumption of having data and having conclusions. This is a different type of abstract because you don't have data and you don't have conclusions. So is there a model for how to write an abstract where you don't have information yet?
The abstract, okay, let's do this way. Let me talk about the overall structure of the proposal, and then if I didn't get in the end to the abstract, please remind me, and I'll also talk about the abstract. Basically, the big change in the way you structure it as opposed to the article structure, which also will reflect on the you want to reconstruct the mechanism and the dynamics in sea level change. Here they may take your idea using vermitide platforms. Okay, that's your overall aim. Your aim is to reconstruct the dynamic in sea level change. Specific research questions are the specific questions you're going to answer using your methodology. Okay, for example, specific research question could be, what is the dates or the rate of accumulation of vermitide? Or if your other question is Natufian rituals, so the overall aim, for example, will be to better understand ritual activity within the Natufian world. Specific research question will be, what type of ritual activity can be associated with burials? How can we define burial context? How can we look? So you break it down to very specific questions, usually not a yes-no questions, but how or what or so on, which are directly connected to your methodology. Okay, these are the questions that leads your methodology, that leads your analysis. And I'll come back to it. Then, beyond your aims and objectives, you need to show that you are well informed of the topic. You have an introduction and the background. Not always it's divided. So some people like to start with aims and objectives because that's a proposal and that's fine. Some would like to start with an introduction. So a bit like what we did with the article, those very general sentences to focus what we're going to do, then goes to the aims and objective, and then go to the background. So if you do divide the introduction and the background, the introduction should be super short, and the background is most of the proposal will be your background, because as opposed to an article, you don't have your own data. What you need to show here is the literature review. Now, invest in that, because that's what most people will look at. They will look at your literature review to see that you are well informed, and invest in that because these are the kind of things that you will just do copy-paste into your thesis. Okay? So you already start to work and you're actually writing text word by word that will be part of your thesis. Okay, so that's very important. Now, the background should give extensive literature review. Here is the main difference between the 5-page proposal and 15-page proposal. It's basically how much literature review you are capable. And obviously in the Maritime Civilization department, they don't give a lot of emphasis on the literature review. And in archaeology department, they do. And they are the advantage of 15 pages, mostly literature review, is that you probably are writing 90% of the literature review you already need for your thesis itself. And vice versa. When you do 5 pages, obviously your literature review will be more limited, and when you go and write your own thesis, you'll have to expand that. So there are pros and cons for each one. I don't think you waste your time in any one of those cases, so it doesn't really matter. Now, here I kind of tried, it's very general and it's very dependent on your topic. Not every topic, a geographical or a climatic review is relevant, okay? If you're looking on heritage and archaeological park, then a review on climate is less relevant, or a periodical on the period we are talking about today. So it's less relevant. But nevertheless, usually you give literature review, so you can talk about the geography, okay? So if you're talking about now on the southern Levant, ancient Egypt, give some about ancient Egypt. If we're talking about specific period, could be Epipaleolithic, could be a Byzantine, a Crusader, or Iron Age, and then Iron Age 2A, and so on. And then these are like the general review, and you have to bear in mind that when you get to this part in the proposal, the reader already have the focus. So the reader know that you are going to work in the Negev Desert or in the Carmel Mount cave, or in the Jordan Valley, or whatever, on lower Paleolithic or Bronze Age. So you kind of already know the focus. So you give this broad geographical literature review, periodical literature review, then on your topic. So for example, we talked about the Southern Levant, Carmel region, we talked about the, I don't know, Upper Paleolithic period, then about your topic. So if your topic is about the use of, I don't know, making of fire, so let's talk about fire, and so on. And then if you're going to use the certain methodology, some overview about the use of this methodology. And again, the more limits page you have, the more focused you are. So if you're on a 5 pages, then you're really focusing on who implied microgeoarchaeology and micromorphology on settlements in the Bronze Age. If you have 15 pages, then you can talk generally about the use of micromorphology for archaeology, and then narrow down the funnel shape from broad to focus. Any question still here? Quite clear. Okay, so let me emphasize that again. The aims and objective are the most important part. One of the two most important parts. The background is what will be the mass of your proposal. Very extensive literature review. Try to be also as much as updated as you can. And then we have the methodology. Now the methodology is also very important, and this should be very detailed. Let me give you an example. In your methodology, you are going to extract phytoliths. Okay? I guess all of you know what phytoliths are. These are the those are minerals that are formed in plants, so they are evidence for, they are microbotanical materials, basically. Okay, so usually in an article, I would say, okay, I extract phytoliths following the method by Katz et al. 2010. Here, you have to show the reviewers that you are aware of what you're going to do. So you can say, I'm going to follow the method by Katz et al. 2010, which means that I'm going to take sediment samples. I'm going to wait 20 to 40 milligram, and then I'm going to put it in a small 1 milliliter tube. I'm going to put inside 50 microliter of HCl 1 molar, vortex it. Then I'm going to use solid sodium polytungstate at a density of 2.4 for 5 minutes, and then I take it out and I put it on a slide and I count this kind of field, and I'm going to use a microscope made by Leica, model number M30 something. Very, very detailed, every step, like writing a recipe. Okay, so the reviewer can say, okay, she knows what doing FTR or what's doing radiocarbon actually means. Now, you're not going to do the radiocarbon dates on your own. You're going to send it outside to a laboratory, but that's fine. But still, right, I'm going to take this type of samples from here. I assume that I will have about 10 to 20 samples. Okay, that's fine that you don't know the exact number, and I will send it to this and this laboratory for radiocarbon dating. And so it's about showing that you know what you're going to do, because me as a reviewer for a research proposal, I will look and I say, I think that's too much for an MA proposal. I don't think they can actually do all of what they're suggesting. Or I can say, actually, I would think that the criteria for selecting their samples should be revised. Maybe they should also consider this and this criteria. Okay, so you should be as detailed as you can. And if it is not a more, I just talked here about laboratory focused methodology, but even if your methodology is not very focused on lab analysis and or experiments, of course, if you're doing experiments, you have to detail exactly how you're going to structure the experiment. But if it's more a theoretical issue, then you can say, okay, in methodology, I'm going to look for references. I'm going to look on the excavation reports. I'm going to compare this site and that site. And again, go as much as detailed as you can. Of course, things will change as you start doing the research, and you can leave things open, saying, okay, generally I'm going to look for X and Y, but let's see how things develop. Don't phrase it that way, but it's okay to leave things open and to say, okay, I will decide it based on what's going on in the field. But you need to show, to demonstrate that you know what you're going to do, which lead me to the second part, to the following section, which is the research plan. You need to show a feasible research plan. And the best way to show it is by a Gantt chart. So you can see here at the top, a general, I just Google Gantt chart and look on images. So Gantt chart basically is just to show the different tasks that you have, and the way they progress with time. So basically it's task versus time. And below you see this type of Gantt chart for one of the MA proposals that one of my students just submitted. And you can see, I guess this is the blue is for writing. So here it just mentioned that he's going to write a proposal, although that's, I don't know what's that blue. Anyway, these months were taken for writing the proposal. Here he was in excavation, and then he planned to do laboratory analysis. So you can also divide the laboratory analysis to, here I'm going to do FTIR, here I'm going to do phytolate, here I'm going to do micromorphology or petrography or whatever, or here I'm going to do radiocarbon and so on. Or here I'm going to invest in literature review the first month, then I'm going to look on and participate in this excavation. Anyway, build a plan for your next 1 year, 18 months, 2 years. I don't know how much time you think your thesis will take. It also depends with your supervisors. So he assumed that he will finish all his lab analysis until September, then dedicate the next month for thesis writing, having a first thesis draft somewhere here, which I don't understand why it's like that. But anyway, and then submit it. This is quite a simple one. You can have Gantt charts that are more complex with milestone and deliverables, but I don't think it's relevant for a research proposal. When we are going to discuss grant, I'll show you a Gantt chart that is a bit more advanced. It's not about, you're not, let's say this way, don't be afraid of it. It's not saying that the committee will come and tell you, well, it's September. Have you finished all your laboratory analysis? Are you on time? Because otherwise we're just, throwing you away. It's not about that. You'll have all the flexibility you need to change it. And as many people say, we're making plans only to be able to change them, okay? The idea here is to demonstrate again, that's the whole idea of the proposal, that it's feasible, that you actually thought of how your research is going to happen and that you plan it in a reasonable way. Because I can tell you that the first time that the student submitted this to me as the supervisors, I look at the table everything, submission of the thesis should have been in August. And I was like, there's no way you're actually doing all the laboratory analysis in 3 months, 2 of them when you're in excavation. It's not feasible. There's no way you can do it. It will have to take more time than you actually expected. Okay, so the whole idea of this table is to show that you are aware of how much time things will take, and you plan it accordingly. Okay, and it's okay. Things change. That's part of life. Then, after the research plan, you give your references, your bibliography list. Now, we already talked about references. I don't remember I saw a specific style that is being requested, so you can choose your own style. The most important thing is that you are consistent. Choose a style and stick to it, okay? But don't invent your own style. Take a proper style from one of the journals or whatever, and then follow it, and be consistent about it. I do strongly recommend you do not use a style like in PLOS ONE or Nature that the citation in the text are just number 1, 2, 3. Give the citation in the text with the full name, okay? Cohen and Cohen 2010. So the reviewer, as they read, can understand who you refer to, okay? And then after that, some like to have figures. So if you already have an image that can illustrate what you're going to do, or a map of the sites you're going to work on, and so on. I know quite few, but there are some supervisors that do not like figures at all. And then the reviewers ask for figures, and then the students is found in the middle between their supervisors and reviewers, and what I should do. But let's cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay, so I think that's it for here. And so let me go back to the abstract. Okay, so the abstract basically should follow quite the same structure. So I would start again with some general introduction, okay, just to have a focus. So as was with the abstract with nature, the first parts are the same. A general sentence to introduce you to the topic, another one that highlight the problem, the gap, or the importance of what you want to do. And then instead of here we show XYZ, you just say the aim of this study is so and so and so. And then you go and say, okay, to do this research, I'm going to use this methodology, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you end up with a sentence saying what is the broad significance or contribution you envision this study can have. Okay, so this is basically how you would structure the abstract. Okay, any questions until here? All good. Okay. Okay, so for your assignment, so the same thing for next week. What I want you to do is to write the aims and objectives. So choose a topic for your research. If you already have an idea for your master, do it or your PhD. If you are thinking of something, then maybe take it as an advantage to actually take advantage to this is to help you, to guide you. How do your research relate to general debates or general topics? So it could be, how is it relating to so okay, let me say this way. Why is the aim the most difficult issue? Because what you need to do, and that's really tricky, it doesn't sound that way, but it's really tricky, you need to balance between two things. From one hand, you want to relate to very broad things. For example, you want to correlate to sustainability of societies. Okay, it's one of the most broad things you can imagine, what's sustainability of societies. On the other hand, you want also to be focused. So you want to talk about, how can we understand sustainability of desert societies in the 3rd to 6th century. Okay? So people understand, okay, you relate to issues of sustainability and all that, but you're also quite focused. But that's still quite general. So you can say, okay, how can micro remains or sediment analysis can help us better understand the sustainability of desert societies in the Negev in the 3rd, 6th century, or how do changes in sustainability in the Negev relates to other general Mediterranean issues? How can we understand better the dynamic in sea level? How can we understand the engagement of people with ecological parks by looking at this and that? So you need, from one hand, to relate to very broad debates. What is ritual activity, which is very into a specific debate on ritual activity in the Natufian, or you want to discuss whether, I don't know, Eshabnot Yaakov is pre-Ashulian or Ashulian by looking
because that was very helpful.
You know, let's do this. Let me share this screen with you. Okay. Okay. See now this Word document. Okay, so this is the proposal by one of my students, Chandler. So he's looking on the Middle Bronze Age in the Common Coast with the excavation of Fruti, students of Fruti in mind. So the research aim, the general research aim, is to examine the role of natural resources usage in the development of one of the few Middle Bronze Age urban settlements on the Israeli coast, located in the Lavia territory. That's quite a long sentence, but that's okay. That's part of style. And I'm not teaching you exactly how to write English. Most of you know it better than I do, but what actually to write. It aims to test this using a microgeological approach and study sediments, architectural features, malmix, plaster, materials, and pottery. So, from one hand, it gives you these very general things of how the role of natural resources in coastal urban settlements, so not just the use of natural resources in coastal settlements, but also in urban. So this is more specific. Middle Bronze Age, more specific, and then already giving us the case study, which is Tel Dor. And it continues to say, okay, but the way that I'm going to look on natural resources usage and how it's correlated to the development of urban settlements is using a microgeological approach. So I'm not going to look on botanical remains, sort of, or I'm not going to look on architecture. I'm actually looking on microgeological approach, and I will study sediments, also architectural features, and some way malmix, plaster materials, and pottery. And then the research questions, you can see here. I think we change it anyway with the numbers because there's no point to do one if we'll continue. But so the general question is again how natural resources utilized within Middle Bronze Age settlements adore reflect interaction with local coastal environment. That's the general questions, and the specific questions are okay. In what ways could car implemented within construction? So here's a specific question about specific type of rock. Then what sediments and temper were used for mud brick? So it's really detailed, each one of the questions. What material is the plaster made of? Is it geogenic? Is it pyrogenic? What materials were oven walls constructed from? Okay, how they fuel the oven? Did they use coastal vegetation? Here specifically do phytoliths, so you can already understand which type of methodology it's going to use. It's going to do phytolith analysis and so on. What pyrotechnology were these ceramics subjected to? So when in the beginning you say I'm going to study sediments, architectural features, mud brick, plaster materials, and pottery, here it's really detailed. What is a or presentation skills, send over the aims and objective, and I'll try to give you some general comment on it. Although again, this is something that your supervisors will know much better to